Okay, this is chapter 12, individual behavior for principles of management, management 3302. So I would say all the chapters in the book are good and needed, but this is a really interesting chapter, and simply because something I've long held is that there are three things that happen um, in managerial life, reality, leadership, just in reality in general, which is this. Again, if it's sociological, right? If we're social scientists, we'd say if you're acting a certain way in an organization, it's human behavior. So you're acting that way generally, whether it's at home or an organization. And and what's happening is the conversation I have with myself results in the conversation I have with others. In other words, like if I don't feel very good about myself and I'm telling myself, so I'm struggling emotionally or I have a poor sense of self-esteem, I'm probably going to end up having those issues and relating to other people, not all the time, but many times out of those issues. And what this is suggesting is that there are some perceptual distortions that when you're talking with somebody, sending them a message, verbal or not verbal, in fact, psychologists call this metacommunication, that there's a message, but then there's also something that's kind of locked into the message that has inferences, and they get it. Like you can say, "Wow, you did a good job," or you could say, "Well, you did a good job." So even like inflection is communicating something that maybe that the words aren't. And the idea here is that that happens because there's perceptual distortions. We'll look at those, what they are in just a minute, but specifically, but they're stereotypes, halo effects, selective perception, and projection, and that's what's going on. The intrapersonal conversation we have ends up showing up in the conversations and the way we treat others. So stereotypes, obviously, is that basically you understand a group of individuals or just an individual that belongs to a group, if you're just only one person, as being a certain way, and that's stereotype. A halo effect, which means you have one characteristic of a person, and basically from that one characteristic you form an entire impression. The one thing is so good. And then there's selective perception, where you limit kind of the perception of information only to those things that agree with your understanding or your desired understanding of the person. And there's projection, where you assign an individual kind of our own personal attributes, and we put them on another person. There's actually two types of projection. There's negative and positive. So we can project onto somebody positively, like that they may not be the best person, or they may be the best person, but it doesn't matter. It's that our perception of them we place onto them, or our negative perception we place onto them. Another one are what's referred to as attribution bias, or the fundamental attribution error, and you develop basically explanations for causes, and and the attribution error is basically saying is that because we have a desire to remain innocent, so basically the attribution error is just simply suggesting it's really not their fault. And so like an example of this is if you're going down one of the highways, Highway 59 or Highway 10 or 290 or whatever, and someone's speeding in the far left lane, you may think to yourself, wow, that person's such a reckless driver. But if you jumped in, so that's an attribution error, simply because you're saying that they're wrong. But if you got inside the car, what actually might be going on is they're not speeding because they're trying to be reckless, but they have, say for instance, somebody who's just had a traumatic health event, and they're trying to race them to the hospital. Hospital is close by, and they're trying to get there as fast as they can, or you understand, right? So that's attribution error, attribution bias. It's actually referred to as the fundamental attribution error, where you blame somebody else when someone goes wrong. For two reasons. One, you want to remain innocent. It might actually also a second, another reason might be is that you may have negative perceptions of people. But, usually you want to remain innocent. And two, it doesn't means we don't have to take responsibility. Another thing that's become very much A part of management studies is personality, and there's some debate. I hate to even mention this, but there's some debate whether or not personality is fixed or not. I think it is. Most of it is, in my mind, and the textbook does an admirable job of bringing up a number of the good personality theories, and it misses a couple. I personally, I like the Enneagram. I don't know if you're familiar with that. You can look it up, especially if you're a Christian. Perceptions, personalities are somewhat divided around whether or not that's a useful tool or not. And then the other one would be the Strengths Finder, which is a bit less personality, more strengths. But anyways, let's look at some of these personality tools. The big five, and I'm just going to have you pause the video right now and read through those 5 traits. Okay, and they're pretty. These are widely used. A number of organizations will actually test you on your personality. They did at HCU for me, HCU for me. But anyways, it's extroversion versus introversion. Person, whether or not they're assert themselves, if they're extroverted and they're comfortable with others. Agreeableness would be the second one, and that's, if a person is generally trusting of others and helpful. Conscientiousness is, and you read through them all, but organized, focused. Emotional stability, which is also referred to many times as emotional regulation, and openness to new experiences, which means you kind of let life emerge and you don't try to control it. So the other one is the Myers-Briggs, and this was developed by Carl Jung, and he theorized it and tested some of it back in the day, but now since that day they've done a lot of work around both the big five and the Myers-Briggs, more with the Myers-Briggs. And the Myers-Briggs is basically measures for, well, I've done all of these, by the way. I've done all of these personality assessments. These I'm talking about and others. I do find them helpful. Again, I find all of them helpful. I mentioned my 2 favorite, but this one is extroversion versus introversion, sensing versus intuitive, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. I want you to pause the video real quick and read through those. Okay, so you end up with combinations. Just so you know, you end up with combinations. Like you could be extroverted and intuitive, thinking and perceiving, and that looks like this. So yes, JT, and this has become so. You can read through those. You can pause the video and read through those if you want. But there's numbers of variations within the Myers-Briggs. Many human resource departments use them, and really they're used to see. And here's where the research comes in. They're used to see what role you'd be most effective in. Because believe it or not, certain profiles match certain types of careers and occupations. So, an extroverted salesperson probably is good. Although there's some work cultures and organizations where introverted salespeople, probably like medical devices, that would be good. But you understand. So these also help people in not only in career placement, but they also help them. It also helps them understand how to communicate and appreciate differences among people in the organization. Another thing you want to consider, and this is, I really appreciate this. There's been numbers of study on locus of control and whether people have internal or external locus of control. There's been studies on college students and their locus of control. Basically, internal locus of control means a person feels like they can control their overall success, that it's up to them. External locus of control is where people kind of feel like they're a victim of their context. The most successful students, the research said, by the way, is those with internal locus of control. And then this is the last one, and cognitive behavioral therapy. I don't want you to go, dig this up, but cognitive behavioral therapy, it pulls from a number of ancient and modern philosophical sources to say that there's basically 3 things that are happening in the human. There's thinking, feeling, and action, and they work together. There's a lot of debate about which happens first and which happens second, and I'm not going to get into that. But I have an opinion. The idea, though, is that if you have certain behaviors that don't agree with the way you're thinking, or you have certain feelings associated with behaviors that don't agree with your thinking, you can develop cognitive dissonance, which is your mind is convinced of two different things at the same time. This section of the book is really important to read through. And the point of this section of the book, and the point of uh, the point is that you always are, you and I are always trying to, and this is the intrapersonal conversation versus the interpersonal conversation. The conversation I have with myself flows into the conversation I have with others, as we're trying to reconcile our feelings, our behaviors, and our beliefs. And so I think that's the real work of management. It's one of the reasons I just love this section of the textbook. Okay, I just highlighted some things briefly, as you noted, because I'm not trying to keep you too long on these. But they're important to me. I think when I do these videos again, remind yourself these are the things you need to turn your attention to. They're important, not only for the course, but really for your personal development.